Do you feel continually let down by modern media? Do you miss the good old days, back when all that mattered was a good story and not some agenda? Do you have ambitions of picking up a pen and pad and fighting the creative war yourself? Then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'm going to talk to a creator who said enough is enough and started making the content they wished was out there. Join us as we discuss the ups and downs of the self-publishing world. We want to help empower you to join the Iron Age of media. Welcome to Iron Age Marketing. Welcome, Jack Lloyd, to the Iron Age Marketing Podcast. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, partially because I just had some protein drink and that made me feel real good.
What kind of protein drink? What's yours a choice?
I use the Naked Pea protein. It's very simple ingredients and clean. So it's just kind of, distilled protein without all the extras. And, I just like having something that is simple but effective for just supplementing, protein and stuff. I mean, obviously I eat meat and steak and chicken, all that stuff, but sometimes you just need a little extra boost.
I was going to say, you're not going to hurt my heart by saying you're vegan. I know that because I've followed you enough to know you're not.
I'm not, definitely not vegan.
Yes. So, welcome to Iron Age Marketing. We talk about self-publishing, and you're one of the few guests I've had on that's, I guess, covered the entire gamut of putting their artwork out there. You've done books, you've done comics, you've done music videos. What is your favorite medium, just right off the bat?
I mean, I can't help but be biased.
Which of your children do you love more?
It does feel coolest doing music videos. I mean, I just gotta be, straight about that, because there is something fun about working on your own music and actually going to studio and recording and then being that center of attention, when they're shooting the music video, be out in public and, coordinating it all and being a part of it. It feels extra special. Like, it's a little something different when you're, there doing your music and you get people seeing you and then getting to see the production afterwards. So music has a special place in my heart, of course.
And you just explained why I went nowhere in music, because it was my least favorite part. I hate being in front of people. I just want to sit in my room and write songs. Damn it. Can't I just do that? So you've been an author, you've been a comic book creator. What are the I guess why have you chose to do that by yourself as opposed to finding places to produce it for you? It seems like at this point you should have enough of a background to think, hey, he sells.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a big part just wanting to be in control of what it is that I was doing. Doing something so unique niche too is kind of also its own hard sell, especially in the comic book universe. Because not only am I doing a comic book series that's a specific genre of superheroes, which is, its own unique fandom, it's also something that had, political undertones dealing with voluntarism and, the title and some of the subject matter. So I'd be facing an uphill battle no matter where I would go, especially in the mainstream, which is largely controlled by a democratic socialist leaning cabal. But for me, I just really wanted to be able to drive everything and drive the creativity, drive how it, goes in the production and have more control over things. So given where technology was at the time, I was able to do that because self-publishing was really starting to take off, especially when you look past, 2010 and the technologies that are out there for being able to kind of organize your stuff and get stuff, produced with third parties who can even have it open for sale for you and have it sold with royalties. So I thought that to me made the most sense. And I didn't want to have to deal with the minutia of doing daily shipping and managing all that stuff, because that's not really what I want to focus on. I do it with certain campaigns. There's fulfillment for specialty perks, but that's not really what I want to be doing day to day, is like seeing what orders came in and having to fulfill it. And there's some who will say, well, it's a good idea if you're trying to really scale big. Like, I talked to Tuttleton's creator, Connor Boyack, about this. He was, really encouraging, like, trying to do your own warehousing and shipping if you're going to be that, size and scale. But for me, it just made more sense, especially with starting small, to have that handled with third parties where I don't have to actually manage any of the day-to-day shipping. They, take care of all of it for me, and it's all there and itemized and stuff like that. So that really is what drove me to stay self-published this whole time. And I still to this day have really no interest in trying to put it into some third parties, either creator-owned outlet or trying to put it in a publishing group or anything.
Okay. Now, obviously, you have a political bent to that. How has that market changed? I guess since because you've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure we look at where the voluntarist comic book started to now we're seeing people like Eric July go out there and make what $3.7 million off of his first
Mhm.
comic book. Do you feel like the market itself has changed in that time, or is that just like the one off of the century because he's Eric July?
No, the market's definitely changed. He's not even unique in terms of the alternative media growth in the comic community.
Mhm.
He certainly has been one of the most successful, and there is, a truth to that being in large part because of his existing media personality and branding and other things that he had a
Mhm.
fandom for. He didn't come to this raw. If he was a nobody already just starting, I don't think he'd be successful. He's successful in part because he was really good with his musical talents and building a fan base there. He was really good with being libertarian and being a face there. And of course, with his show on Glenn Beck with the Blaze, he got some fandom there. And then he really crushed it when he was doing critiques of the wokeness in comics. He was really good at being a daily commentator on the issues and building a fan base over years specifically for the comic book realm. So he had a mixture of things that really just makes sense as to why he was
Yeah.
successful. And I was not surprised by that at all. That was like, yeah, I'm expecting this with him. That was no surprise. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible to like move up toward those levels, for individual creators, but you have to be realistic. Like,
Well, and even with yourself, I mean, you do what you do because you've done the groundwork and you've built up your own personal celebrity to a point where you have the communities that you're in, where you're known for being the guy. At least that's the way I do it from an outsider perspective. That's the way I see it. I see you doing most of the same thing Eric did, just maybe without the backing of the Blaze Media helping.
right. So, I mean, and that there are disadvantages for me. I am different from a lot of these people because, and I've known this going in, and I always decide to choose that risk accordingly. Is that I've always stayed more anonymous with my information and my name and other things like that. Whereas other people are often going out there and just like, oh, here's my name, here's my location, all this stuff. They put it out on the table, and that actually builds a lot of connection. And because I've always been a little bit more behind the scenes and have been a little bit more private with how I do things, have gone to fewer events, just going around and around, have typically stayed more local. I've hindered my own success in that way. I'm aware of that, and I've been conscious of that. I just chose that path that I valued having more of my privacy than just trying to put it all out there and be like, okay, let me, just be raw with everything and give more,
Mhm.
personally identifying details. So, that is a disadvantage on my end, but I do have that long history within the Liberty sphere that I've built up over many years through many relationships and, grinding that does help fuel the growth of the comic series. And that's why with, the origin series, that is the main arc that I have right now with the comic, I've been 100% funded for basically the last 5+ years on all the campaigns going well above it. And for me, that's my measure of success. My measure of success in terms of my growth is not necessarily like, oh, am I making millions every time? My question is, okay, did I successfully fund it? Did I have a profit? Is everything smooth? Am I growing? Okay, yes. If those all check off, then great. And that's been consistently happening with growth with the series, raising more and more funds. And this one, we raised the highest amount ever with, I think, almost $20,000 on that campaign in funds raised for it. So, for a lot of people, that would be pretty impressive. They'd be like, wow, I raised, almost $20,000 to do my first comic. That's cool. That'd be pretty impressive. But there's other people in the comics community who've done, of course, a lot bigger and better. And a lot of times that's tied to them having some existing celebrity. Again, people like Ethan Van Sciver, who, was a comics guy who came out of the mainstream. He's had great success with this series, Cyberfrog. I mean, he's raised hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he also promoted Eric July and other people in the
Mhm.
movement. He's been a great supporter of people trying to help build up the alt publishing space in comics. So, it's just a lot of these different things that you have to consider when you're going down that path of what type of publicity you want for yourself. What are your risks? What are your tolerances? And how far are you willing to go to try to get the word out there? And how successfully can you do that, and safely can you do that? Which can sometimes be a factor depending on your personal profile and connections.
Yeah. And so you keep mentioning Comicsgate. I don't know how many people will be listening to this. Well, I assume most of them are probably pretty familiar with it. What exactly is Comicsgate?
So Comic is just kind of this, I guess you could say, reaction to the I would just say the politicization in a SJW woke, that is social justice warrior woke bent in comics, where the focus of the stories start to shift toward the politics of the particular writers, and that becoming more the forefront of the story as opposed to writing intriguing stories and characters. And that's
So pregnant Joker.
right. Yeah. I heard that was like a dream sequence or something like that. But that could be a good example of just like this idea where people who are currently in the writers groups are focusing more on this is just descriptive of what it is, leftist politics in the space, as opposed to intriguing stories and character development. And in that process, there's been lots of things that people consider alienating, where they will change a long-standing character's race or sexuality just for the sake of trying to be like, oh, look, see, this is new, and we're pandering to this particular demographic, and that frustrates people who have a long-standing identity with the character and who appreciate the continuity of the story, or really enjoyed like how that character was developed. So to them, they felt very insulted by it and didn't like the direction, and so there's changes about that.
Well, and what's always crazy to me is that like you can just go and show how bullshit that is by just looking at someone like James Tinian, who has the politics that he has and is involved in the LGBTQ community, but continues to put out great content that people gravitate towards. Something's killing the children is crushing. My personal favorite is the is it Ministry of Truth, whatever it is, the Department of Truth. Like, it's a fantastic comic book there. He continues to crush it, and I think you can see it's not who the people are that is the problem that people have. It is very specifically letting their politics get into the comic book space. And like I said, it's just so frustrating to have the counterfactual right there and people pretend it's not.
Right. And I would say, just I try to remind everybody, I think politics and comics have always been together. So this idea of like, oh, there's like politics and comics he introduces is not true. It's always been in there. Even going back to the early Marvel comics, the first ones, they had lawbreakers will always lose, which was like this pro-status mentality of like promoting cops. Obviously, Superman, Batman were huge war effort propaganda characters, and were used heavily for, being anti-Nazi and being pro-America. The X-Men was a commentary on race relations. There's, talks about all different types of things. Most of the major presidents have appeared in, your major titles at some point. Obama was in Spider-Man issue, as a promotion for him for the inaugural day. So this idea that like politics isn't in comics is just simply not true. It's just that I think with the shift in the direction of the politics that are being used, combined with them becoming much more direct and focused in the character dialogue, like it being like the focus of their character development and like their, expressions and shaming of their characters, like kind of like a judgmental thing as opposed to just a character thing or flaw. It became too much, I think, for most of your mainstream comic book readers who just got a distaste for it. And I would say that reaction is in large part due to the fact that many of these comic readers are American nationalist leaning already from the comic books. So a lot of these people are like very pro-America, you could say. So the leftist SJW commentary will also tread on that trope, that kind of psychological norm for people who like characters like Captain America, right? Very clearly political Captain America, character. And other characters that have very pro-America sentiments, like Superman, his personal mantra, fighting for true justice in the American way, that got replaced and then whatever brought back. So, it's a complicated social, psychological situation history, but it's just come to a head in recent time.
Okay.
Where enough people are like, okay, yeah, this is just too much. It's going too far, where the stories just suck and you're just, keep doing the same type of tropes here.
Yeah. So I'm curious, given, the controversy, do you, in your position, do you look at it as being a net positive, the whole Gamergate thing? Like, obviously it went in, it blew up the industry. You can go and look at the sales on comic books that aren't manga at this point and see, well, congratulations guys, you destroyed something beautiful. But do you think that forcing the opening of the alternative space has been a net positive?
Absolutely. I personally think it's been a net positive, because I think that having the opportunity for people to check out other comic series and independent artists is absolutely wonderful. Especially because for so long, all the big companies have had these long-standing IP monopolies that they've kept, lobbying to like keep holding on to for as long as they can. And they have such built-in cultural and institutional notoriety, with their usage across mass media and the government, that I think it was kind of a good thing that in the end it led to people being able to see, oh, what else is out there. And I think that we're starting to see that happen in the entertainment realm in the same way that you are starting to see the niche diversity of interests flourish in an open free market with internet sales, and of course food and other things like that grow with the development of the internet and more technologies. When you have more opportunity for people to connect, then suddenly you're no longer one person in a small town that has this interest that nobody else likes for like hundreds of miles. You could be like, oh wow, okay, I can connect with people all across America or the world, and we share this interest in this specific genre, this niche thing, and now suddenly you have a community and you have an interest, and that bodes well for anybody that has more niche tales to tell or stories they want to communicate, because now they can reach people and they're not limited by the physical publishing or having to go through Diamond to get distribution. They're able to reach people a decentralized way, and I think that is incredible. And it's going to only further more people being satisfied with what it is that they're able to connect with and see, because they're actually going to have opportunities for content that really appeals to whatever it is that they enjoy in their zone of interest.
Okay, so now I guess to get a little more technical with you, is there a specific strategy that you use that you employ with each of your endeavors? Or is like a blueprint that you use, or is it been different every time?
So when it comes to the outreach, like the big part of getting people's attention and building up their rapport is that at least from my end, there's different ways to do this depending on how much money you have, of course. But if you're in the mode of, okay, I have some budget constraints and I'm kind of raw, I'm kind of doing this from the ground up, which that's my zone. My zone is, oh, I don't have big budgets, I don't have big money. So what do? I had to do it the hard and manual way, which is that I had to, back in the day, personally message hundreds, if not thousands of people. I had to slide up in the DMs, before Facebook had like a 50 limit ban, before, you get stopped. I had to send out emails. I was on, this website that some people might know that's been defunct for a while, Jeffrey Tucker's old liberty.me. And I was sending messages to every single person, I could, about the projects of what I was doing. And so a lot of it is manual. If you want to build up that initial audience, especially thanks to all the social media controls that exist now that weren't there in the past, you have to do the manual work, and you have to be very comfortable with rejection. So when you're writing and you're telling people about this, whether it's sending a Facebook message or on another social media, or trying to send a direct email to somebody, you're trying to just be as warm and friendly as possible. Let them know, hey, just want to let you know about this, but if you're not interested, no worries. Appreciate your time, like that kind of thing. And you have to keep doing that until you find your people. Eventually, it sticks, because eventually you come across people who do like what you're doing, as long as it's not something totally crazy or crappy, right? So eventually you find your people who are like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And you start to build from there. And that's, what I did, I would say, in the after the initial stages. Because at first, when it comes to like Indiegogo and like crowdsource fundraising, which I've relied on a lot for pretty much most of my projects, I guess minus my nonfiction book, which I just did myself. I start, of course, with your local people, which is your friends, family, that kind of thing too. So if you're doing your first big project, you're looking to do, okay, here's my first creative thing that I really want to do, right? If you're in that zone, you're first going to rely on your friends and family network. Those are going to be the people that are going to be your initial supporters typically, because you're like, hey guys, I'm doing this thing, and maybe it's a non-fiction book or a music video, or a comic book, whatever it is. You're telling them that this is your passion project, you're serious about this, and you want to try to see if you can succeed with this. And if you have good relationships, generally your friends and family will chip in and help you get that off the ground. They'll help you get your first legs up. But then, of course, what I was talking about before is where you have to build past that, right? You can rely a little bit on your immediate social network, but eventually you have to try to find who your people are who would be interested in it past it. And that's going to just depend on the zone of your content and who is most likely receptible to that. For me, it was relatively easy, because I was already plugged into liberty-oriented communities and I already had some connections, so it was straightforward to kind of move from there and to know the people who to do outreach to, and that kind of thing. For others, it might depend. If you're doing something that's more like science fiction-y and broad appeal, well, now you're going to have to try to find people who are fans of other popular genres of that, and then see if you can do outreach to them or in Facebook groups or whatever, get on small shows and work your way up, that kind of thing.
So it sounds like you definitely subscribe to the idea that that you're going to have to begin with things that aren't scalable.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, because you can't get an email list without those first connections. I mean, you could try to like
Mhm.
buy something or try to like, rip stuff off of different services. And I did this back in the day. You can't do it anymore. You used to be able to back end on Facebook and like mass download everybody's emails. So I used that. LinkedIn, you can export your LinkedIn contacts to an Excel. That still exists. But again, with email lists, if you're trying to build that kind of stuff, if you do that, right, and you're putting into MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever, and you send this initial thing out, a lot of these people are going to sit there and say, I didn't sign up for this. And you're going to get bounced and they're going to probably shut down your account. So you can't really build a raw email list like that or a mass messaging thing through an independent service by forcibly taking lists. You're going to get people complaining and saying, I never signed up for this. And then you're going to get in trouble.
Mhm.
You're going to lose your account. So you have to build up organically. You need to get that initial grouping of people that you can get into an email list who actually are wanting to be part of your content. And then when you have that kind of little base, whatever it is, even if it's small, even if it's, 20, 50, 100, whatever people, then after that, that's when you're looking, okay, how can I promote my sign up list so people voluntarily sign up for your mailing list or whatever it is that you're going to update them on, whether it's developments with, your book you're writing or what you're doing in a production, whatever else it is. So, I did a lot of that and I did a lot of, just direct emailing and things like that to get around those strictures, that might have, limits on different mailing subscription services, stuff like that. But there's no way to really do that well and effectively and sustainably without the initial legwork of doing what you need to do to get those, initial contacts of people who are actually interested.
Yeah. Well, I feel left out. I didn't get into the game early enough to get a personal email from Jack.
Well, this would have been back like in 2012 or something, like early 20.
Yep. No, I don't think I got into like 2014 or something like that. So have you had any big misfires that you've made over the years that you've been doing this?
Oh, plenty.
Things that you're like, why did I decide to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so I made plenty of mistakes when I was doing my comic initially because I was coming to this raw. I didn't have a background in publishing. I didn't have a background in comic book production. Everything I did was me like, I just really want to do this and I'm going to have to learn as I go because no one's going to teach me. You can't be like, hey, could I go to like comic book making school? There doesn't exist. I mean, there wasn't, at least back then. I mean, maybe there's some Coursera or something like that now, but I mean, it definitely was not like you could just go and like, here's how to do this start to finish in the comic book world, right? You had to decentralize things from forums and other stuff. Like it just wasn't around. And a lot of the information that did exist would be too antiquated. It would be stuff that's talking about comic making in the 80s or 90s where you're doing things with pencil and on paper. It's not the same, right? The digital world advanced way rapidly and you're just sitting there like, okay, the technology is here, but
that's so even like I remember I went to college and graduated in like '06, and I remember everything that I was learning in school like already being outdated in like the communications field. I'm like, I think my freshman or sophomore year I was teaching my audio recording class because I knew more about what was available than the teacher did at that time. So if you are young, guys, utilize that to your best ability. You probably know more than half the people that have been doing this for 4 decades in a lot of ways.
Right, at least on the technology side, absolutely. It evolves too fast, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, great. Like just this next year, there's something else that makes these 3 apps obsolete and does things for you. So, but I've done it all. I've done because back in the day I was a kid, I would be on tripod cities and working HTML making websites. So like I've seen like the small like rough things and like having to build websites on a software and then upload it directly to like now where it's like build your website online. You don't download anything. It's just everything's on the internet. So
I'm curious how you see like the changes in social media over the past couple of years affecting the ability of people to do and promote what they've done. You already kind of touched on it because there's a lot of constraints that there weren't a number of years ago. But do you still feel like it's a net positive social media, or maybe we should find other ways to kind of go around this?
Oh, social media is always still a net positive. It's just being realistic about the platforms you're using and the costs and the risks. So, back in the day, Facebook used to be amazing. Like there were no barriers. You could just literally invite as many people as you want to an event. You could message as many friends as you want and let them know about whatever you're doing. It was awesome. And nowadays there are still ways to like do that potentially with inviting events, but messaging's been curtailed. Repeated posts is going to be, flagged as spam, stuff like that. So you can't do what you used to be able to do. So the ways to go around that these days if obviously you could do the traditional, I'll just spend money on Facebook, do a boosted post or an ad, or you could sit there and say, okay, there's limitations I can do on a mainstream platform, but then I'll also seek out alternative platforms where it's not so restricted and supplement what you can't get, in the mainstream with the alternatives, right? So that's kind of where you can make up for some of that throttling. That's just sad and unfortunate from how they change their business models. But you just are forced into that paradigm. You're going to have to do more work across different platforms in order to get the same reach that you may have gotten 10 years ago just on one platform because everybody's on it and there's no restrictions. So, for me, I'm on many different social media platforms where I share things. I have stuff on MeWe, on Minds, on Ecency, which is the front end for Hive. I have an Instagram, I have Twitter, I have Facebook, I have YouTube.
Hive still exists, by the way.
Yeah, Hive still exists. Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. I have presences across a lot of different platforms and networks. And when, individually, you might be like, oh, okay, that's a little something. I still do get of course, because the work I do in the pages and things that do and following, I definitely have content that reaches very far. But when you're just starting up, you're going to be looking at, different small wins in different areas and then the aggregate of that, right? So it's you might be like, oh, I only got 20 likes here, or only got 20 engagements here. But it's like, okay, but if you're doing that and you're doing that in 6 platforms, okay, well, now suddenly you have 100, right? And it's kind of like what you have to do in order to move forward. And right now there isn't a Hootsuite that is a single management tool for posting in multiple places for the alt media realm, but Float, I know they are retooling to do that. So I know that there are current projects leading toward that end of trying to integrate mass posting for alternative social media networks. But again, if you're starting from total scratch, okay, you have no real presence, you have no real branding, then you have a lot of work to do because it's content is always going to be king as usual. You're still going to have to create interest and give a reason that people support you, if you're starting from the ground up. So you're going to have to do things that engages people, makes them want to, check out what you're doing. But it can be done. It just is going to take a lot more diversified work across multiple platforms to build that up, especially if you don't have a $10,000 Facebook ad budget to run.
Yeah.
Well, then you're going to have to, do the hard legwork of regular posting. Yeah.
I guess so. Obviously, we're right here at the end, and just about 10 billion questions that you could ask us because you've been in the field for so long. If you had, one, you can only say one thing to the people out there that are looking at doing this themselves, what would that one thing be?
Well, my one thing to everyone is that, winning and doing well in this zone of trying to get your creative idea, up and running is a matter of stamina and longevity and outlasting others. It's not necessarily being the best. There's lots of competition. There's lots of different interests, but the reality is it's going to be you outlasting others who give up or fail or refuse to improve. So if you have the mentality of, I'm really passionate about this project, I believe in this, I'm happy about working on this every day, then it's up to you to say, okay, I'm going to keep working on this and keep a mindset of growth, trying to constantly improve and reflect on, okay, what can I do better, every day and every month and every year, and keep that going. And if you continue it, there's a good chance that you're going to be successful just by the virtue of outlasting others. Lots of people run out of money, they give up, they don't do things in agile ways, and you can win just by not giving up and just being one of the last people standing in a certain zone. So that's really the key there.
Well, I'm glad you said it because that's always my advice to people. Just keep at it. You listen to all the people talk. I come from music, but for years you listen to people talk, and what you find out is it's long and hard for everybody. Overnight takes 10 years, and the people that don't make it, generally speaking, doesn't matter how talented they are, they're the ones that give up. We could all look at very untalented musicians out there that have huge careers just because they just kind of kept at it until something took off.
And that's true. You had, and especially in this modern culture where you have multimedia opportunities, a lot of times it is just throwing up until something sticks, and you don't know what will stick necessarily until it hits, especially in this environment of the social media manipulation, because there's just so many different factors going behind the scenes of things that can throttle you or unfavorable things. And sometimes it's just hitting that right moment, that right day. You had the right key tags that bypassed, whatever censorship or throttling there was.
Do you remember that JJ Fish video on World Star? back in the day?
I'm not sure. What was it of?
It's the dude who's like doing this love song, like a super high produced rap video.
Uh-huh.
But he talks like this. And it was terrible, absolutely horrible.
Uh-huh.
But the track and the video were so well produced that it was on World Star. We're talking millions upon millions of downloads of this terrible, terrible musician. But like, what could that guy have rolled that into? Utilizing, hey, I've got the audience now. People are watching me. You could have. I'm surprised you didn't get a TV show out of it because it would have been. It was so big and so ridiculous. Like, why wasn't he the new Wild 'N Out or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, and that's true too. That's another factor there is that when you do finally hit that turning point, have you prepared enough to make the most of that opportunity? You always want to make sure that you're psychologically and strategically ready, that if you do finally strike your moment where something hits a virality enough that's like, okay, yes, this is getting me the attention I need, or seeding you out in a way where you really have elevated your notoriety, that you're ready to move forward on that. So that's another important factor.
Awesome. Well, Jack, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to me. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Sure. So if you like the comic book side, volcomic.com, that's VOLCOMIC, V as in victory, volcomic.com. That's where I do the comic book stuff. V association, that's the V again as in victory, association.com. And then, what I do, with the philosopher, PHOLO, thephilosopher.com. Basically among those three, you be able to find, anything I do. Of course, Jack Lloyd, and you type in voluntarist or libertarian Jack Lloyd on Google, you'll come up with all kinds of interesting things. Hopefully nothing too bad, but
he's been on the internet long enough. The SEO just works for him.
I definitely am very strong SEO'd, and I have so many different zones of like internet niches and fandoms and funny things that will pop up. All the time people say, I had no idea you were doing this thing. Like, cause it's like, they had no idea I was like viral for some other thing. It's like really funny. So
awesome. Well, once again, Jack, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you having me on.
Do you fancy yourself the next Tolkien, Lewis, or Barker? Maybe you just have something subversive to say. Hopefully this podcast is helping you. But maybe your ambitions are just a little bigger than you can handle on your own. Head over to ironeadsmarketing.com and let Nikki P help ensure your book doesn't release to nobody.